Yes, I have done it. I have watched the Universal Classic Monsters movies for the first time ever. 8 Universal Classic Monsters. Ah, 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 ah. Join with me now as we count down the Universal Classic Monsters movies. It's part 2 of October at the movies. Alright, join with me, comrades. Okay, since when was Dracula Russian? Comrades. Alright, the Universal Classic Monsters. I finally watched all of these this year. It harkens back to a time when movies ran under 90 minutes. I appreciated that. But a top 8 movies is just, it's just a really weird number. For the official list, I'm going to do a top 5. After, of course, breaking down the order in which I saw the Universal Classic Monsters movies. First, The Mummy, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Creature from the Black Lagoon. I always lose track here. The Wolfman, The Invisible Man, Phantom of the Opera, and wrapped up with Dracula. Here's where the list comes in. We'll open with 3 honorable mentions in no particular order, since they're officially off the list if they're honorable mentions. Bride of Frankenstein, Creature from the Black Lagoon, and The Invisible Man. Which brings us to The Mummy, The Wolfman, Dracula, Frankenstein, and The Phantom of the Opera. Dracula, Mummy, Frankenstein, Wolfman being who you usually think of when you think of the classic monsters. Alright, number 5. Probably The Mummy. It's really difficult for me to do this because in any other media, I always appreciated Dracula, The Mummy, or The Wolfman, and Frankenstein has never been done. Frankenstein monster, excuse me, there is a difference. Has never been done justice in any other media. Now, The Mummy. It took me a couple of times watching the movie to even notice any mummy in this movie at all. I started to wonder if the villain in The Mummy was the wizard who had summoned him or something. Because it certainly wasn't the archaeologists. They weren't the villains. They were really just too curious for their own good. Number 4. Phantom of the Opera. The only movie filmed in color and the only one that ran over 90 minutes long. Again, we were maybe 3/4 of the way through the movie before I saw a phantom. But the fact that they tried to tie this in with a musical and an actual stage production made it entertaining. Number 3. The Wolfman. The Wolfman is probably the only one of these Universal monsters that was seen in the movie from beginning to end, front to back. instead of showing up somewhere around halfway to over halfway through. It was a good movie. I mean, it was a classic. Number 2, Dracula. And I take back the thing I said about the Wolfman being the only monster that you saw in the movie from the beginning to the end. Dracula was definitely a key player throughout the entire movie. Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler, Vlad the Vampire, Count Dracula. I mean, and you could clearly see his hypnotic abilities throughout the movie. It was fairly stunning. Speaking of stunning, and I am just stunned that I have to say this. Number 1, favorite Universal classic monster movie. Frankenstein. Frankenstein was clearly the misguided villain of the piece. The Frankenstein monster was the empty shell that he created that honestly had quite a bit of heart to it. And then you have the villagers reacting. Well, they see a giant monster roaming around. They're going to act like Gaston and the bumbling villagers in Beauty and the Beast. They see a giant monster roaming around. Yes. There was something very surprisingly entertaining about the original Frankenstein. Something that was missing from Bride of Frankenstein, because, again, this is not Frankenstein's bride, it's the bride of the monster. We're nitpicking again about the difference between Frankenstein and the Frankenstein monster. Frankenstein was the doctor. And how many times in other media has this gotten confused? This has been the rundown of the Universal Classic Monsters. Hope you all had a happy Halloween. Happy November as well.